This podcast, it's a Costard and Touchstone production. Welcome to The Donor, a modern horror story. I'm Alan Katz. This is episode 6, Rage. Our story up till now. When my old friend Hal, now a successful radiologist, joined personal genomics company 23andMe, curious about his health genes, his DNA sample connected him to the donor kids he'd anonymously helped conceive almost 30 years before. As surprising as that was to Hal, it was a lot more surprising to most of his donor kids. They had no idea they were donor kids. Not having gotten to raise natural children of his own, Hal welcomed the chance to know this fascinating group of people. While all of those relationships were friendly or at least civil, one of his donor kids, Beka, accused Hal of having a genetic sexual attraction to her. The problem, she wasn't entirely wrong, but she wasn't entirely right either. That set off a firestorm between Hal and the Dibblings, the donor siblings he'd fathered. Beka held sway over the intense bond that had formed between them. Finally, Hal made inroads with new donor kids Jerry and Janice. Jerry had Beka's blessing, Janice didn't. While Jerry reached out to Hal quickly, Janice took nearly a year to reach out. When she did, it was with a medical emergency that Hal resolved for her, opening the door to their relationship. What Hal didn't know yet, that relationship would never escape Beka's shadow. But as their bond twinkled to life, with Hal having just saved Janice from a medical misdiagnosis, Hal saw ample reason for hope.
I did get a message from her after that, which she shared with me that had come from her mother. Her parents were divorced. They lived in different states, her parents. But the message she shared with me from her mom said, please make sure you thank Hal very much because he's really done you a wonderful thing here. After helping her out through her medical crisis, we started to exchange emails. It wasn't something I was actively pursuing. Again, I was kind of in a, if you write to me, I will respond mode. She would write, I would respond. And then she would respond and I would respond. She was telling me about her life, where she was, what she was doing, what she was studying, what her goals were. She started opening up about where she had come from, what her life had been like. She was working on a PhD. She was very close to graduating, actually. I think she had finished all her coursework. She was working on her dissertation. It was in a subject that was very male-oriented. You wouldn't expect a woman to be studying this particular topic. I find this stuff fascinating. Anything about the world scientifically is generally pretty fascinating to me. This was a scientific endeavor that I didn't expect this girl to be working on as she was.
That your daughter was working on.
Yeah, exactly.
You felt pride.
Another doctor in the family. Always a good thing. The fact that she was so close to it. She had a boyfriend who lived abroad who was flying in from Europe to be with her while she was hospitalized. After we had exchanged a bunch of emails, we didn't touch upon the Beka situation at all, not even tangentially. I figured if she wanted to talk about it, I'll let her bring it up. She has that email of mine from a year ago, so there's an open invitation for her to talk about this if she'd like. Things were very positive with Janice at this point. I thought to myself, if I can just personally meet these kids, it gives me a huge leg up. I think it's really difficult to get a handle for who someone is if you haven't met them. I think that was part of the problem with Beka, is we never met. And I didn't want this to happen with her.
Had you had an opportunity to sit in a room with Beka even before that particular part of the conversation, there would have been a very different context than what she had.
Absolutely. I think... And that's part of the tragedy of the story, is that if we had just made time for a lunch, it would have possibly changed the trajectory of the outcome. So as I'm sitting there having these wonderful conversations with Janice, and they were all very good, they were all very positive. She made no effort to make me into something I wasn't. She seemed genuinely appreciative of what I had done. She seemed to have some respect for what I do. And I didn't want to ruin any of this, having all of these conversations where at any point something could go off the tracks. I thought, let's try and meet So I wrote her and I said, how about if I get on an airplane and I fly to you and we have lunch? And then I'll fly home after lunch. The 2-hour lunch, a 1-hour lunch, whatever. It would be worth it to me, be able to be in the same room at the same table with her. She said, that would be fine. Do you mind if I bring my boyfriend? And I said, of course, bring your boyfriend, bring whoever. I don't care. Bring everybody, bring the world. I just want to meet you. And, that's fine. You pick the place. Tell me what time, I'll be there.
This was the meeting with Beka that never happened.
This is the Beka meeting that never happened. And she readily agreed. And she had been released from the hospital and she was doing fine, working on her dissertation. Her boyfriend decided to make it an extended stay. So he was there and we picked a restaurant and I flew out there and they got delayed because they were about an hour from the restaurant and they ran into some traffic. And so I'm like walking on the street in front of this restaurant, nervous as hell. And I remember walking into a clothing store, and there are these two young women who are, working in the store. Maybe one was a customer. And I said to them, I'm meeting a DNA daughter of mine from a sperm donation for the first time. Do I look okay? Is there anything I should change? Should I buy that shirt over there and wear that instead? I was really, really nervous. And, the girls looked at me and they said, you'll do just fine. Don't be nervous. Finally, she showed up with her boyfriend. She looked absolutely beautiful. Her boyfriend, really good-looking European guy. The boyfriend is about her age, a year or two older maybe.
That would be around 30. Hal, at this point, was in his mid-50s.
And he speaks fluent English with a European accent. He was dressed very stylishly, as you might expect some European guy. Before they had arrived, because they were late, I was talking with the hostess. I told her about the specialness of this lunch. I said, we've got a whole lifetime to catch up on because this is my DNA daughter. And the hostess just had this beaming smile. She was all excited for us. And so she found us a table in this crowded restaurant way in the back outside on the patio where we could really sit and talk without having to compete with other voices. That was really great. So she shows up, we hug, we go back and we sit down and we have this wonderful, wonderful lunch. I brought her a gift as well. I also had wanted to run by her this plot I had for a screenplay I was working on. I also told her it might be worthwhile to kind of clear the elephant sitting in the room and maybe talk about what had happened with Beka. She readily agreed. I marched her through all of those breadcrumbs that Beka had left me. I was very open with how I was feeling the whole time, how I was very careful not to bring up anything flirtatious or dealing with sex or love in the conversations with Beka. All I did at the end was to ask her, what are your feelings about this? She said, well, what made you come to that point where you felt like it was necessary to ask her that question? And I pulled out that picture with the t-shirt. Holy shit, I love you. I said, well, when she sent me this. And when I showed her that picture, her jaw dropped. She grabbed my phone and she showed it to her boyfriend. And she looked at it a second time and then she handed it back and she said, Beka should never have sent you this. I kind of get it now. Beka is a really fun, engaging person. That's why I've become so close to her. And I can see how you could get so wrapped up with her. She never should have sent you this picture, particularly after what you guys have been through. I don't remember the exact details of the conversation, but I do remember one thing that Janice said during our lunch, which, it's one of those things like, I fixed it. It was one of those statements. She kind of laughed when we were talking about genetic sexual attraction, when that came up in a conversation. And she kind of flippantly said, well, incest is the new gay. What did she just exactly mean by that? That incest is okay? Is that what she just said? Because that's how I'm interpreting that. Like, well, incest is the new gay. And I didn't touch it. I didn't want to go there. I didn't want to create any waves. I just put it aside and thought maybe one day this statement will be important. Then she told me what her plans were for the future. Because I said, what's going on with your dissertation and all that? She said, well, I have to present my dissertation next month or something, a month or two. As long as that goes through, I'll get my diploma. And then I'm heading to Europe, where I've signed on for a 2-year job at a prestigious scientific institution as a special fellow or something. And it's in the city where my boyfriend lives. So I have 2 little dogs. I'm going to take my dogs. I'm going to move in with him and see where it goes because we love each other. I thought to myself, good luck with that. I asked her, I said, well, how long have you known this guy? Where did you meet? She had been at a conference in this city the previous year. They met while she was at this conference and they just immediately fell in love with each other, apparently. Love at first sight. They had seen each other, I think, a couple of times in between. I don't know, something about maybe just the experiences that I've had through life. I know that long distance is difficult. They don't really know each other. They don't know what it's like to live together. And she's got 2 dogs. I didn't say anything. It was just, hey, sounds great. Sounds like a wonderful guy. Good luck. I'm excited for you. It sounds amazing. The other thing that was interesting from this meeting, her sibling Miles lives in the same city as she did, and they had become very close. I knew that ahead of time, so I knew they were probably close. About a quarter of the way through the lunch, she got on her phone and texted Miles to tell him that she was safe, that she didn't need him to come. When she did that, I thought to myself, just what in the fuck did Beka say? Did Beka really suggest to her that I was really some sort of rapist? I mean, that's like, why else would you need to text your sibling brother that you're safe with this guy in a public restaurant?
How did she put it to you? To explain what she was doing?
Very nonchalantly. Yeah, she tried to play it down very coolly.
I'm just texting Miles to let him know I'm okay because you're okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I thought to myself, well, how did things get to this point? The audience has heard the letter I wrote to Beka. I can't imagine there was anything in that letter where you could hop, skip, and jump to rapist or danger. But
You've never met face to face.
And I never met Beka. And yet here I am sitting with this lovely young woman who feels necessary to have had backup in addition to her boyfriend in case I was some monster. I'm a little Jewish kid. We just don't do that. It's so alien to me. But you know what? It was turning into a lovely lunch. I didn't say a word. I just went on with lunch. I said goodbye at the door. She hugged me at least once or twice more. And then she wanted to go across the street to one of the hot paraphernalia places to grab a bong or something. I don't know. And I said, hey, let me get that for you. She said, that'd be great. So I went over to the store with them and got her a bong or something. I can't remember what we got. We hugged again. And she said, hey, let's stay in touch. This was lovely. I said goodbye, called my Uber, went to the airport and flew home. A very successful lunch, beyond my expectations. So I had explained my part of it, and I could tell when she saw that picture that Beka had sent me, I know that she realized at that point that there was more to this than what she had been told. Her boyfriend soon left to go back home, and she was left working on a dissertation. We started talking about things that friends would talk about, what was happening with the world, her relationship with her parents, which apparently was difficult. She was not the typical daughter growing up. They sent her to a boarding school. She enjoyed getting high and drinking, and she's kind of the party girl, a little bit of a smoking habit. I think she probably smokes a lot more than she wanted me to know, but she was serious about her studies, and she was very thankful for the gift I had brought her. When she had told me before we had made plans for the lunch that she would be going to Europe, I thought about my own experiences in Europe when I was young, when I backpacked. And the most important thing about backpacking, one of the most important things, is you have a good backpack. So I got a really good backpack for her. In each of the zippered pockets, I put an envelope. And in each envelope, I put a bunch of $100 bills with, again, some wonderful quotes to help with life. The total amount was $5,000. I didn't want to give her what I had given to Jerry because Jerry was special. Jerry was the first one who allowed me to meet him, and I wanted that to be special. But I thought to myself, for each of these kids who meet me, I want it to be a super positive experience. Because I remember being that age in that period of my life where money was short. It was always something that you needed when you're a student. You never have enough. Here she is going off to Europe. I have no idea what her situation is going to be like when she gets there. She's going to need cash. So I gave her this backpack and these wonderful envelopes and some money, some spending money, and thought, you know what, it's a good send off. And then something really interesting happened. She gave her dissertation and passed with flying colors. And then they told her that they had overpaid her for her TA, teaching assistant job, and that she actually owed the university $6,000 before they would give her her diploma. We talked about it on the phone. She actually called me up and we actually had a phone conversation about this. She asked me if she could borrow the money that she would pay me back. And I said, well, how about your parents? You have a mom and a dad. Dad's a retired attorney or something. And I forget what her mom did. And she said, I don't have a good enough relationship with my parents to ask them. They've been so opposed to so many things that I've done in my life. They'll just tell me, told you so kind of thing. And it would just be easier if I borrowed the money and paid you back. I told her, I said, let me think about this. Because I said, I just gave you $5,000. What did you do with the $5,000? She said, I didn't know about this tuition issue. And so I took my boyfriend to Las Vegas and we had a really great time. And I shared some of it with my siblings. I don't really have a great relationship with your siblings aside from Jerry. I'm not sure I feel that all that good about what you did with that money. I don't mind you taking your boyfriend to Vegas and having a vacation. You've worked hard for your degree and stuff. It's time to blow off some steam. I get that. But to give some of it away to people who hate me, it's a little bit bitter. But I gave you that money as a gift and you do with it as you wish. That's what gifting is about. It's not for me to determine. But I said, I need to think about this tuition situation. I ended up coming back to her and say, look, I'm not going to have you borrow money from me because then there's this obligation for you to pay it back. And that's just going to create a barrier. And I don't want this barrier. So here's what I'm going to do. Give me your account information at school, how to log in. And I'm going to pay off $5,000 of the $6,000. The other $1,000 is on you. Hopefully your parents will each kick in $500 or whatever you need to do, but I'll take care of the first $5,000. And so she gave me the login information, and sure enough, she owed them $6,000, whatever, $232.68 or whatever. And I paid off $5,000 of it. And so she was able to graduate. She thanked me and thanked me and thanked me. She said, this diploma is going to have a little asterisk on it. Thank you very much, Hal, for what you did. And I'm heading off for Europe in a week, and wish me luck. She gets to Europe. I don't hear from her for like 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, 5 weeks. I'm not even sure. It's been a while, but it was a while since I had heard from her at all. And suddenly I get this message, can you prescribe for me or send me a prescription for my antidepressants? And I said, what's going on? She said, well, I can't have them sent to me from America. They won't get through customs unless there's a prescription. And I have some of the medication, that my mom will send me, but it won't come through. I said, what's going on? Why, do you feel depressed right now? She said, well, my boyfriend is throwing me out. We've been living together. I've got my 2 dogs here. He's gotten really angry with me. He's given me 1 week to get out. He's staying with a friend, but he's going to come back in a week and I need to be out of here. And I'm really scared. I don't speak the language. No one wants to rent to an American. They don't know how long I'll be here. They don't know if I'm a risk or not. I just started my job, so I can't really show them an employment history that means anything. I really don't know what to do. It so happens, talk about serendipity. About 10 years before, I was on an airplane ride from my second home to my primary home. In the same row with me was a family from Europe. It was a young man, probably in his 30s, who was not officially married, but had been living with this woman who was sitting next to him. And they had 2 kids out of wedlock who were, 9 years old and 12 years old, something like that. And I asked them, what are you doing? You're coming out to the mountains? And they said, yes, we're coming to the mountains. We're going to rent a car We are going to buy camping equipment, and we're going to drive to our friend's house in San Francisco and stopping at your beautiful national parks along the way. I said, that's fantastic. Did you get reservations? Because our parks can get filled up pretty quickly. And they looked at me like, really? What? And I said, yeah. I said, and do you know where you're getting your camping equipment? And they said, no, not really. I said, have you made any plans at all about this? And they said, not really. I said, I'll tell you what, I live in this really beautiful place. When you get to your hotel, ask your concierge about this place, because what I'd like to do is have you come and stay with me for a night or two, and we'll figure everything out. I'll take you to the local camping places. We'll make the reservations at the national parks. Not only that, I'm going to show you some of the areas around where I live that tourists never get to see because they don't know about them. And sure enough, this family of four came to my house, much to the initial chagrin of my wife at the time. And they stayed with us for a couple of nights. And we did some incredible hiking, and we went to hot springs. And by the end of 2 days, everybody's crying their eyes out when it's time to leave. Like, the kids don't even want to leave. They just want to spend their summer vacation, with Al. So we had a great time. In fact, they came back the next year to redo it again, this time for 3 nights. So I had this wonderful relationship with this family from 10 years before. And it turns out this family lives in the city where Janice is looking for an apartment. Now, I hadn't talked to them in 10 years or so, but I send a Facebook message to the woman and asked her, how are you doing? Da, 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 da. And by the way, I have a daughter that you never met, that I didn't even know existed at the time when you were here, who needs the help of a local who knows the city like you do, because I know you've lived there your whole life. She tells me that her husband left her, that she's living by herself with her 2 kids who are now older, they're in college or whatever, and that she would love to help because she feels like she needs to pay back the hospitality that we had given her when she was out here. And they bonded immediately. I mean, immediately. They went around town looking for apartments. Finally, Janice came back to me, and after a couple of days, and said, I found an apartment. It'd be perfect. It comes unfurnished. I think it was a studio. It's in a great part of the town. It's not far from work. It's great. It costs about $1,000 a month. I said, can you afford that? She said, well, I can really only afford about $750. And I said, well, what are you going to do about the other $250? I said, let me guess. You don't want to ask your parents. She said, well, I'm going to ask them, but I know they're going to say no because they don't want me here in the first place. So I said, well, let's see. The difference is $250 times 12 months. What's that? $3,000. And you're going to need some furniture. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to wire you $4,000. Go get your apartment. And that way you don't have to worry about being thrown out by your boyfriend. You've got a place to go. We should be good. Gave her the money. She signed a lease, and all was good.
On the surface, it was good. Hal would learn much later that, in fact, Janice's lease was for 6 months, not a year. She pocketed the difference. But in the moment, all was good. Hal had wanted to be there for Janice, and he had been, and their relationship flourished.
Every time she met somebody, she'd tell me about him, and we'd talk about him, and I felt like her confidant. I really felt like her best friend at this point. I'm sure she was telling all of this to Beka, but I felt like we had this wonderful, close friendship, and I could complain to her about my collapsing marriage and my lover and whatnot. It was terrific. We had shoulders to cry on. This went on for a period of months, 3-4 months, 5 months, something like that. And we had gotten to the point where the relationship was really wonderful. It was a great friendship. And there was a wonderful real estate opportunity that had come open to me. I thought, you know what? I'm going to do something really special for this girl. I gifted her a little portion of this real estate deal. It was a $10,000 part of this office building in a big city. I said, one of the things you should learn about as you go through life is how real estate works. A lot of people, they've never heard of private equity investing. And hey, if this is something that I can teach her and she can learn from actually being hands-on, getting those quarterly reports and seeing what it's about, and how distributions work and capital gains. And most people never get this education. And I thought this will be a wonderful gift for her, that a gift will keep gifting, because instead of asking me for money Hopefully the distributions from this investment will help her along taking care of the vet bills and stuff. We talked about it. And it was during that conversation when she said something to me, one of those lines that you'll never forget, like the others. I had asked her how her sister, Beka, was feeling about our relationship. I was curious if she was getting any blowback. Did she feel guilty having this close contact with me? She said, well, Beka's really not happy about it at all, that I have this relationship with you. But I explained to her that all of us are individuals. We all have this decision that we can make on our own. I'm not beholden to her for having this relationship with you. And I thought that was kind of interesting because if you recall, Beka had said to Jerry, I don't have any problem with you having a relationship with Hal. Why should there be any difference here? Why would she have an issue that Janice was having a relationship with me and not have an issue that Jerry was having a relationship with me? I was thinking the only reason would be if she was jealous. There was also something that Janice had said to me somewhere along the way, and I don't remember at what point, but Janice had used the word narcissist to describe her sister, Beka. It was the first time that word and Beka had been in the same sentence. The four of them, Jerry, Janice, Miles, and Beka, they had this fun little game that they would play where they would write out most likely to succeed or most likely to fall down stairs or most likely this or that. And one of the questions was most narcissistic. And they all voted Beka, apparently.
And then one day, Hal's down at his local Starbucks, where he runs into an old friend he hasn't seen in years. She's a psychiatrist. They begin to catch up.
How are things? How's your life? How's your life? What are you up to? What are you up to? Da, da, da. And I started telling her my story. Probably talked for about half an hour, 45 minutes. Of course, most of the story was about Beka. And I said, I'll never understand what happened. And this woman looked at me and she said, I don't think that Beka was the victim here. I think you were the victim. I think you don't realize it. I said, what are you talking about? Accused me of wanting to rape her. I assumed I must have stepped over some line at some point that I just didn't understand, didn't realize. I've really been blaming myself for what happened. And I certainly should have been the adult in the room. She said, have you ever heard of narcissistic rage? I said, I've been to medical school. I got honors in psychiatry. I've heard of narcissism. I've never heard of narcissistic rage. She said, well, you need to read about it because it sounds like what you went through is exactly what the victims of narcissistic rage go through.
The term narcissistic rage was coined by Austrian-born American psychoanalyst and author Heinz Kohut in 1972. Kohut's term describes something elemental about the way people with narcissistic personality disorder fly into a rage at the slightest provocation. According to the National Institute of Health, narcissistic personality disorder, NPD, is a pattern of grandiosity, a need for admiration, and a lack of empathy. There's not been a ton of research done on the subject. In part, that's because it's really hard to create consistent lab conditions and testing models for something with so much latitude, subjectivity, and deception naturally baked in. But the American Psychiatric Association has created 9 criteria that they believe describes an enraged narcissist. They are the aforementioned grandiosity and sense of self-importance, fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, and ideal love, a belief that they are special, unique, understood by all, a need for excessive admiration, a sense of entitlement, especially of favorable treatment by others, a willingness to take advantage of or exploit others, a lack of empathy and an unwillingness to identify with the needs of others, an envy of others or the belief that others are envious of you, arrogance toward others. The bottom line? Raging narcissists have a problem with others. Of course, it's more complicated than that. While your average narcissist thinks the cosmos revolves around them, the pathological narcissist is balancing both grandiose and vulnerable thoughts. That's the raging paradox driving their rage. The emotions spurring and empowering the worst behaviors, it ain't the grandiose ones. Deep down, raging narcissists feel like total failures, unworthy and undeserving. Their rage is a reaction to those feelings, blown massively out of proportion and then misdirected at the wrong people. Mental health professionals sometimes refer to self-objects. Self-object is a clinical term that refers to a person, place, or thing, or even a concept. that is used to define the experience of self. We all have and use self-objects. When we're young, we mostly use other people, our mothers, fathers, and siblings. How they relate to us, how they treat us, whether they're nice to us or not very nice. That defines us to ourselves. As we become adults, we stop using other people as self-objects and instead transfer those abstract connections to our work or play or politics or community. Dr. Mark Ettinson is a respected psychologist who specializes in the compassionate treatment of narcissism. On his website, Heal NPD, he explains,
"It's pathological for adults to continue using other people as self-objects like they did when they were children. Someone with pathological narcissism or NPD tends to pursue positive self-object experiences with a kind of relentless pressure, but they'll also seek to eliminate bad self-object experiences with an equal fervor. When a self-object no longer fulfills the function of sustaining the self and instead is making the self feel helpless, there's a need inside the narcissist to eliminate the offending self-object. It isn't enough to simply ignore the offending self-object. It isn't enough to communicate anger and then let it go. Because the self-object is experienced as a part or extension of the self, it must be eliminated, or it will continue to threaten the stability of the self."
Having never met Beka myself, I have no idea whether she's a raging narcissist or not. But if she's anything like the character in Hal's story, she most likely is one. There's a question I have to ask. How can I not? Is narcissism hereditary? Well, according to the National Institute of Health, yes, it is moderately inheritable. So it is entirely possible that this particularly maddening piece of Beka's personality flowed directly from Hal's bloodline, if not from Hal himself. That's how our genome works, right? But in the moment, Hal had done his research about raging narcissism, and his conclusion was inescapable.
Oh my God, this is exactly what happened to me.
Next thing you know, Hal is seeing proof everywhere.
First of all, who becomes a narcissist? Are there any risk factors for narcissism? And it turns out there is a risk factor. One of the risk factors is that you have a bad relationship or difficult relationship with one of your parents, usually because your parents, you're never good enough in that parent's eye. She had that with her mom. No matter how well she did in her performing art, it was never good enough for her mom. So, okay, that's the first box, that's checked. The narcissist also oftentimes keeps changing jobs. They think that the other people at work don't recognize their brilliance. She had gone from one job to another. She was on her third job since we had met. Let's check that box. Well, this explains the hundreds of Facebook selfies. Not everyone who posts hundreds of selfies is a narcissist, but many narcissists will post a ton of selfies. When we started this project, I sent you a video that she made of herself. About halfway through it, she admits to being a narcissist, which I thought was kind of telling. Now we have not only her siblings voting her most narcissistic, a psychiatrist who thinks that perhaps this was a case of narcissistic rage, and now we have a confession from her. It just explained everything. I thought, oh my God, I think I've been the victim of narcissistic rage.
You didn't feel like it was a facile explanation?
If it hadn't checked every single box, maybe I would doubt it. But there was nothing that couldn't be explained by it, and you didn't have to make a major leap to get there. Does not excuse me for not being the adult in the room. I'll never forgive myself for that. So the narcissist will sometimes have something what's called the shameful thought. For the sake of this discussion, let's just say that her shameful thought was that she wanted to have some sort of intimate relationship with me. Call that the shameful thought. Turns out, if someone shines a light onto that shameful thought, the narcissist will do two things. First, they'll do something called projection. They will take that thought, they will regurgitate it and place it onto the person who is shining the light onto that shameful thought and accuse that person of having that thought. That's the first thing they do, the projection. And the second thing they do is that person now becomes the mortal enemy. Once you become the mortal enemy, there's no getting your foot out of that trap. You will be the mortal enemy forever. There's nothing that you can do about it, period.
And then in the middle of it all, 2 more donor kids pop up on 23andMe. 2 more daughters, Lucy and Melissa.
Lucy shows up first. She's all excited. She was one of the few who had been told. Her father is a successful physician. Coincidences, she happens to be studying in the same European city where Janice is. They're literally neighbors. Just like the others, when Lucy shows up, she's very excited. She wants to know all about me, and I give her my family history, and we're exchanging stories where she came from, and it turns out she grew up not that far away from where I had grown up. For a few days, it was a wonderful experience getting to know another one of these progeny of mine. And we also enjoyed the same type of music, as it turns out. Piano music, piano and violin music. It's instrumental, and I listen to it a lot when I'm working. So we have that in common. And then suddenly, after like 3 days of back and forth, she says to me, you seem like a nice guy. It's been wonderful, but I have a father. I love him very much. He loves me very much. And I almost feel like I'm cheating here. You're not my dad. And I feel like I need to say goodbye. Did Beka get to her too? I'll never know. Doesn't matter. I was respectful of that. She said she would fill me in from time to time on what she was doing.
But when Hal wrote her 6 months later to see how she was doing, she never responded. And Hal never wrote to her again, though he still thinks of her.
Her dream was to live in the mountains. Well, I know where that came from.
A few days after that last communication with Lucy, Melissa suddenly popped up.
Melissa was very kind, very nice. She was well educated. She had a white-collar job for the government. I think it came as a surprise to her as well. She did not know her father. Her father was a drunk and was not part of her upbringing. So she grew up without a father for the most part. We had a lot in common. We rooted for the same team. Politically, we're perfectly aligned, as all of them are. We're all of the same political bent. And we had some wonderful, fun conversations. She liked Harry Potter, just like I did. We had a wonderful initial relationship. Janice told me that when Melissa showed up and everyone realized that she was gay, that Beka said to Janice, Melissa doesn't have to worry about Hal because she's gay.
Once again, Hal found himself on the defensive. But now, armed with a possible explanation for Beka's behavior, narcissistic rage, Hal shifted to his front foot and went on the offensive.
I recorded a bunch of messages to Jerry. I said, a lot of this has not made sense to me. I never could really explain why things happened as badly as they did. And I said, I think I found the answer. I think your sister's a narcissist. And I think I was the victim of narcissistic rage. And I explained why and took him through a lot of it. Pointed out all of these consistencies with being a narcissist, the change of jobs, the selfies, the projection, all of it, being upset that Janice can't have a relationship with me, but he can. And Jerry's response was he wasn't really that impressed with it. I think some of that was to defend her. I think at the time, he felt very close to her and wanted to defend her, and I understood that. They had met, and he had told me at one point that he found her very attractive as well. He was afraid of becoming like me towards her.
When did he say that to you?
I think when we'd met for dinner that time. Well, first in that letter that he had written, the one that said that he wasn't going to be communicating with me very much, in that letter, he had intimated that he didn't want to become like me. And then when I saw him at dinner, I can't remember his words exactly. He didn't go to the precipice of any kind of sexual attraction, but I could tell that he was taken with her.
That changes the whole meaning of when he says that to you. He's saying, I know what that feeling is, and I need to resist it.
That was my take. So he was a bit hesitant to buy into what I'd said, but I didn't really care. I wanted to get it out there. Just let it soak. Let the seeds germinate. With narcissists, eventually it'll come out. Things with Jerry never really changed very much. We never really talked about it again after he didn't entirely buy what I was selling.
So Hal turned to Janice. Through all of this, their bond had continued to grow. They spoke regularly. When Janice's dog got sick to the tune of several $1,000s, Hal paid for the vet. And don't forget, Hal also had given Janice $10,000 worth of real estate investment. For the moment, Hal's relationship with Janice was the healthiest relationship of the whole bunch. She was the donor daughter he still hoped he could get right, especially now that he understood what exactly he got wrong. Jerry's unimpressed shrug he could deal with. Jerry had shrugged off Beka's "Holy shit, I love you" t-shirt, too. Janice hadn't shrugged off the t-shirt. She'd gotten how inappropriate it was in its context. She shouldn't have done that. That's what Janice said. Hal hoped, I think he believed he could build on that foundation and maybe even get Janice to see him entirely through her own eyes and not Beka's. But when Hal reached out to Janice and started to tell her what he'd learned about narcissists and narcissistic rage and how Beka fit the description perfectly, Janice balked.
She said, I don't want to talk about it. I know what happened. Those were her words. I was blown away. I couldn't believe it. After everything I had done for her, that she couldn't have this conversation with me was really hurtful. And I also said to her in one of those last conversations, I said, knowing what I know, what I think is the truth now, I am also withdrawing every apology that I've made about what happened. I said, if you want to have a conversation about this and we talk about this, and after a conversation, I feel like I do owe apologies, I will make those apologies. But for now, all those apologies that I made, I retract them until I have a conversation with you about what happened. And then we can figure out if I need to apologize for something. And maybe I do, but we have to have that conversation. That was the last meaningful conversation I had with her. That was several years ago. For me, it was a turning point. It killed this great desire I had to forge these relationships. These are strangers. I didn't raise them. I don't know them. I'm not their dad. I don't really know all that much about them. There's great danger here that I didn't appreciate.
But now that Hal did appreciate the danger, he felt compelled to do something about it. That's the next episode of The Donor, a modern horror story. We'll see you next time. The Donor, a modern horror story, is a Costard and Touchstone production.